Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 298. The purpose of the sealing of these set apart ones, part 3. You must obtain the seal of Elohim while you have the time. The podcast objectives are analyze the work involved in obtaining the seal, reveal the value of a complete work, analyze the relationship between our tests and our time, and reveal the danger of those who are not in the way of holiness. This lesson contains timelines and other visuals. Therefore, if you are listening to the podcast, I advise you to watch the video version on our website or YouTube, or request a PDF of the lesson so you can add the visual effect. Are you willing to put in the work? Now, in the most recent podcast, we analyzed the spiritual work involved in obtaining the seal of Elohim. Namely, we revisited the 7 pillars of our faith, 7 primary operations of the Spirit I have taught on from the very start of this ministry. Those of you who have been with us since the beginning know this to be true. To wit, the 7 pillars of our faith was one of the topics we covered during our feature week, i.e., the inaugural week of this podcast ministry. 3 years later, I am still promoting the vast significance of these 7 pillars. And if you haven't already bookmarked them and committed them to memory, I would advise you to do so at your earliest convenience. Here is why. These 7 pillars represent the 7 primary attributes of those who possess the seal of Elohim. Along these lines, we are prayer warriors who pray often as we are led by the Spirit of Elohim. And our prayers generate the desired results according to the desire of Elohim. This is what it means to be effectual. Not only this, but we are also champions of fasting, who fast often and as we are led by the Spirit. And we have ascended to a spiritual plane where our fasting has transcended any singular command. For us, fasting is a lifestyle. Not only this, but we are also spiritually focused. To wit, we are not minding the things of this earth. We are not preoccupied with all the vices of technology and otherwise, which Satan has raised up for the primary purpose of distracting the chosen elect. No, sir, we don't have time to devote our energies or our focus to carnal matters that are a source of destruction to those perishing within the world. Not at all. We are focused on those things above, where Yahushua Messiah is seated at the right hand of Elohim. This, my friends, is one of the primary reasons why he will provide us with the seal. It is because we have proven to him that our treasure is everlasting life, for we are not allowing the enemy to disrupt our spiritual lives with the cares of this life. Not only this, but we are exerting spiritual dominance over the kingdom of darkness and every form of opposition through dominion, authority, and power. Here is why this is so vital to surviving the great distress. If you are not exerting dominion, authority, and power over the enemy in this day, you will not magically begin operating in these faculties of the spirit in the evil day. Here lies the inflection and the problem. Vis-a-vis, many do not possess the dominion, authority, and or power to be victorious in every occasion of spiritual warfare. And this is a relatively good day compared to what we are about to see in the upcoming season. What these fail to realize is as deadly as it is sure. Vis-a-vis, if you are not victorious in spiritual warfare today, you have no hope of being victorious during the great distress. And this is clear evidence you do not have the seal of Elohim. Jeremiah 12:5 reads, if you have run with the footmen and they have wearied you, then how do you contend with horses? And if in the land of peace you feel safe, then how do you manage in the swelling of Jordan? Notwithstanding, if you are dedicated, i.e., the seventh pillar, you will be victorious in the great distress. For if we are dedicated to the spiritual work before us, we will be able to operate in the seven pillars of our faith. The only question is, are you willing to put in the work? 99 and 1/2 won't do. Now, if you are still with us, then I'm quite sure you are willing to put in the work required to operate in these seven pillars. Furthermore, I am quite sure you have already been putting work in. To wit, you aren't starting from scratch as it pertains to this enterprise. Quite the contrary, many of you are here to finish the work you have already started. And some of you are here to become more involved with our ministry because Elohim has called you to leave Mystery Babel with us. Whatever your case may be, the message of the hour is simply this. It doesn't matter how much work you have to put in to obtain the seal of Elohim. The only thing that matters is that the work is complete. Here lies the greatest travesty we have witnessed in the restoration movement. That is, the majority of the men and women within the extended nation of Israel have no desire to execute a complete work. Like many in the church circuit, they are attempting to dictate the terms of their salvation. Not only is this irreligious and blasphemous, but it is also why these individuals will never be sealed. Alas, they came out of the church, but the church never came out of them. Here lies the irony. For lo, many within the extended nation of Israel have an intense loathing for the church circuit. Look here, they will go through great lengths to broadcast their disdain for Christianity to the point where it has become somewhat of an infatuation. And yet, after exerting such terrific energy, trying to visibly distance themselves from their former beliefs and the false religion they once promoted, these false brothers and sisters are thoroughly infected with the same spiritual viruses and diseases infecting Christianity. And we know why. It's because they never fulfilled the intent of the restoration message. Alas, they heard but did not do. They started down the path, but they did not follow through. And thus, I ask, is there anything more Christian than not completing a spiritual task? Think about it. Now, this is why we are warned not to be lukewarm, which is essentially settling for anything less than a complete work. My dear friends, Yahuwah is raising up men and women to lead the renewed nation of Israel out of Mystery Babel as we speak. And if you are operating in any of the degrees of lawlessness, he will not call you to join any of these missions, for you are not being led. And if you are not called, then you cannot be chosen. And if you are not chosen, then you are already dead. Heretofore, I implore you, I am pleading with you, give the more earnest heed to complete the work before you, for you will never be chosen if you settle for anything less than your best. And even 99 and 1/2 won't do. We will never have enough time. Now, there are two final lessons I would like to discuss in this podcast, both of which are vital to your fulfillment of the purpose of this season. That is, your attainment of the seal of Elohim. The first lesson is a key matter concerning tests and trials, which I will offer as an interest point. Every test and trial you endure in this 11th hour is time-based. To wit, you have a limited amount of time to pass each test if you are to obtain the seal of Elohim. All things considered, the spiritual model of the time-based test is not unique to these last days. No doubt, this time benchmark has been the standard for the full duration of the Messianic age. And yet, there is a critical difference between the realization of this time-based model in these last days versus times past. And as this key difference could make or break your election, I will offer it to you as an inflection point. I suggest you bookmark it. In times past, there was always the potential for recovery. To wit, if you failed any test or trial, there was the chance that you could retake it. Nevertheless, that is not the case for these last days, specifically today. For as I have constantly warned this audience, we are living in the 11th hour of the day of salvation. Therefore, if you fail any test at this point in these last days, it is foreseeable and highly likely that you won't get another chance to take this test again. Now, the fool will hear this statement and think that's a good thing because they're a fool. The truth is, exhausting the opportunities to pass any spiritual test is not only a bad thing, it's the worst thing. Here is why. The only way to succeed any spiritual goal is by passing the associative tests. Now, as it pertains to your attainment of the seal of Elohim, these tests are all centered on the elimination of every degree of lawlessness. And this, my friends, is just another reason why the next phase in this podcast is so critical. You see, I am not only going to provide you with the tools, the teaching, and the training to pass every test. My dear friends, I'm going to do everything within my power to make sure you pass on the first try. For though we possess many things of great value, on this occasion, we will never possess enough time. Therefore, should you fail to pass any given test, you run the risk of never having the opportunity to take that test again. And should that befall you in that day, you will remember what I have said. For yet a little while you shall be living, and yet Yahuwah has marked you for dead. One of the greatest dangers to your election. Now, this brings me to the final lesson I would like to share in this podcast as we conclude our analyses of the sealing of these set apart ones. I will begin by asking a series of questions. How many people are in your life today who are not walking in the way of holiness? How many of them are not turning away from lawlessness? How many of them do you suspect were casualties to the great falling away? How many of them are not preparing for the great distress? And how many of them have no intentions of fleeing Mystery Babel or relocating during the second great Exodus? Now, after answering these questions, tally all these individuals and reflect on all the people who are in your life and yet are clearly not heading in the same spiritual direction you are heading in. Take your time and consider each one thoroughly. Now, ask yourself the following question. Why are these individuals still in my life? If I truly believe we are at the end of the day of salvation, what is the value of maintaining this relationship if they are not responding to your light? The truth is, there is no enduring value at all, and yet there is great risk. Vis-a-vis, everyone who is not in the way of holiness is not being led by the Spirit. Ergo, they can be used at any time by the enemy to disrupt your progress and ultimately compromise your election and your attainment of the seal of Elohim. This is precisely why my tally yielded no one. To wit, everyone in my life either has the seal of Elohim or they are on the path to obtaining the seal. Notwithstanding, this was not always the case, but it was always the Father's will. Here is how I know. Yahuwah took me through a season of shedding. To wit, I discarded all the toxic and dysfunctional people in my life, once and for all. And as he commanded me, I have never looked back, not once. In doing so, I have experienced more joy, peace, and growth in the Spirit than ever before. And you will too. For by eliminating all the spiritual dead weight in your life, you will be able to operate at a level of the Father's will you never imagined. That being said, I'm not telling you who to eliminate from your life. Remember, I am a watchman. My role is primarily to warn the chosen elect of clear and present danger, and trying to maintain a relationship with anyone you tallied is perhaps one of the greatest dangers to your election. For that reason, it is foreseeable that Yahuwah, by his Spirit, will command you to sever these ties. My advice to you is simple. Just do it. You'll be glad you did. Like me, you will wake up one day and realize it was one of the best decisions you will have ever made. It doesn't matter if you must shed friends and or family members, especially if you are led. For look, if they're not in the way of holiness, they will all soon be dead. My question to you is, do you want to die with them? If you answer no, that's good. When the time comes, you'll know what to do. And trust me, you'll have no regrets. For whereas your family and friends will all eventually forsake you, there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother, and he remains forever true. Now, here is the final word. Angels of death are coming to kill everyone without the seal. My dear friends, this is the critical takeaway from this phase. This line is the one thing you should remember from all the podcasts I have shared on the sealing of these set apart ones. Therefore, knowing the terror of Elohim, it is time for us to cast off any darkness in our lives and replace it with light. For the bridegroom is coming for those who have overcome every degree of lawlessness. For in doing so, we have made our robes white. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on all the lessons you have heard this week and ask the Father to give you clarity on anything you are struggling to receive. And if you are led, please feel free to reach out to me. You can fill out a form on our website and let us know what questions you have. And remember, the only question that can truly hurt you is the one you fail to ask. Last but not least, enjoy the upcoming Shabbat and the weekend, and be ready to get back at it next week as we kick off the next phase in our podcast ministry, which is designed to ensure you have obtained the seal of Elohim. Our focus will, no doubt, be eliminating the 80 degrees of lawlessness. And yet, we will cover many more topics along the way, all of which will help prepare us for the second great Exodus and the time of the great distress. This will be a very crucial phase at a very crucial time in our world's history. And so I encourage you to be praying and fasting along the way. Trust me, things are about to get very interesting. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 298. The purpose of the sealing of these set apart ones, part 3. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 300, an intro to lawlessness, part 1. I will post this podcast on Monday, July 1st, 2024. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch, continue to pray, continue in fasting, and most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.